Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday yet again. Welcome into another PTN Extra. I'm Evan Kamko, joined alongside a special guest this week, Christina Long, the managing editor of Hogs Illustrated. Christina, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Big week for Arkansas in general. We had a Coach Cal press conference a couple of days ago. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but we're here to talk about football. It's football season. Let's talk about Tennessee. First of all, what are kind of your thoughts of this Arkansas team coming off the A&M game?
Yeah, it's kind of getting to that point where you don't really know which version you're going to get, right? And so I think I've been impressed with the defense so far. It seems like after that kind of UAB faltering, they haven't done a ton, they've been keeping Arkansas in games. They've been giving the offense opportunity. The offense just isn't always taking advantage of that opportunity. And that's something that was the same story of last season for Arkansas. It was offensive frustration and the defense was just doing everything that it could. And at a certain point, last season, toward the end of the year, you saw it kind of wear down. The defense stopped having those great performances, slowed down a little bit toward the end. There's a lot of season left. I mean, it's really flying by, and there's still plenty of games to go. SEC season is young, and so I think we'll see how that goes and how much the offense is able to work through some of its issues. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum at this point about accuracy, protection, passing game issues. Even, the run game has been their go-to, but Texas A&M was able to slow that down too, and that caused them further problems in the passing game. That's another, that's a threat against Tennessee. They have a really, really good defense.
Yeah, and to your point, total defense, number one in the SEC does Tennessee have 176 yards allowed per game. So to your point, it's going to be really tough. And A&M, they have a good front seven. We saw that. I'm curious in your opinion when you look at that game. Do you think the issues when it comes to running the ball kind of stem from not being able to get that passing game going early on from the protection of the offensive line?
Yeah, they're so related, right? I mean, it's easy to look at just the offensive line or just Taylon Green's decision-making or things like that to blame the problems on. But really, and something Coach Pittman talked about when he spoke with media on Monday was how interrelated these things truly are and how it's so hard when one thing falls off, you have to be able to compensate. And I think what we're seeing is an inability to do that. And that doesn't mean they never will, but it's something they're going to have to try really hard to do. And it's hard to do that in season sometimes. So I think the run game, it was bound to happen when they started facing some other, some better defensive teams, that teams would start to figure out what they needed to do. Teams would kind of have their number, and teams would try to make them beat them through the air. And that's what Texas A&M kind of tried to do, and they weren't able to do it.
And to your point right there, Trent Dilfer, we go back a couple weeks, he literally said, you got to beat him through the air. Make Taylon Green beat you with his arm. And A&M was able to do it. Auburn, not so much. But when you look at kind of ahead at Tennessee, we've talked a little bit about having one of the best defenses in the entire country. There's a reason they're a top 5 team. Do you see maybe a change in the offensive line coming for Arkansas? There's been a lot of issues with Keyshawn Blackstock on the left side, and that's really hurt them. Do you see any changes yet, or you kind of just have to let it go and see what you can get from them early in the game?
I'll be surprised if there's changes, mostly because Pittman even said on Monday, nobody really asked him, are you going to change the starters? But he said, I don't think personnel change is going to help us. He said he thinks the biggest thing right now is going to be making sure that the run game is established enough that it takes some of that, he said, pressure off of Green and the offensive line. So I would be surprised if we see some personnel changes beyond just the normal rotation that they've been doing. But, I mean, Tennessee is going to present a huge challenge for them. And Tennessee's offensive line, actually, on the other side, kind of has its own issues. They've had some tackle depth concerns, and I think you could see Arkansas's defense get an opportunity to get some pressure on Nico Iamaleava when they are struggling with those tackles. We don't know about the availability yet. We're not sure what's happening there. We'll start to get those availability reports tonight, obviously Wednesday, and then keep getting those updates. So we'll see what happens there. And Arkansas has had more success getting pressure on the quarterback lately. Landon Jackson kind of broke through. And they might have the opportunity to keep doing that against Tennessee, but some of it will hinge on that availability. So that's kind of the Tennessee offensive line situation too.
Yeah, and to that point as well, they're 6th in the SEC when it comes to sacks allowed. They've let up 6. So we've seen this Arkansas defense start to get more pressure, and it's come a lot because of the good coverage in the secondary, getting those 6 turnovers, continuing to get better in that statistic. When you look at Tennessee as a whole, what stands out to you most about their offense?
Yeah, it's the fast pace. They're so fast. They just want to be up-tempo. We'll see how Arkansas keeps up with that. And then as far as their quarterback, I mean, Arkansas has faced so many young quarterbacks at this point. And every week it feels like we've talked about, if they can just rattle this young quarterback, And the thing about Tennessee's quarterback, Nico, right now is he hasn't gotten rattled. Now, they have not played, the biggest opponent they faced is Oklahoma. They went on the road, they beat them, they played a really good game. As they get into the heart of their SEC schedule, I'll be curious how that continues. But I think, he's one of those guys that you're going to need to know his name for the next few years. He has that kind of talent level. And he kind of has some similarities to Green in terms of when there's protection kind of throwing on the run. He does not have the same yardage, he does not have the same running ability as Green, but he does have a little bit of evasiveness that I think Arkansas is going to have to contain. And he can make just an insane throw that you don't expect him to make. He makes the kind of plays that when Talon makes them look awesome, but sometimes Talon doesn't always make them.
Yeah, and is that because, again, we've seen a lot, we'll talk about the wide receivers for Arkansas a little bit because I'm curious your perspective. For us, it seems like it's been a lot of Andrew Armstrong, and I think that's, everybody's going to say that. And now you're getting a little bit more Isaiah Satenia and Isaac Tesla. But after that, you kind of see a drop-off of production from whether that's the running backs in the passing game or the tight ends in the passing game. Who's that one name that you want to see step up this weekend to give Arkansas a shot to upset Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest person that's missing is Tyrone Broden. I mean, he has not been there. And when he is there, there's been some drops, there's been some things. We were talking, during the Texas A&M game, just some of us in the press box observing, there seems to be sometimes a lack of aggressiveness that, Tislaw really stepped up and showed in this A&M game that Broden, in a couple of those moments when he was targeted, didn't really have. And so I think he's somebody that they're really missing. Now, wide receivers, who they had besides Armstrong was kind of a question for me going into the year. Going into the year, I kind of thought, who do they have besides Armstrong and Broden? And now it's just kind of been Armstrong. And then you see Satania have that, step up, and you see Tislaw kind of come onto the scene. So how they're able to continue to work those guys in, Luke has, it's hard to know because he's dealing with that back issue. And we don't know how, the extent of that. He's been playing. We saw the back thing come up against Oklahoma State. You saw him make a catch in pain.
Yeah.
You saw that happen again. So it's hard to know what to expect from him and how much they're going to ask him to do when he's playing hurt. And the tight ends in general are kind of banged up right now. I haven't seen Varkey's Gums much either. He was a guy that, watching camp, we thought was going to be really involved in the passing game. That just hasn't really come to fruition yet. So there's several guys I feel like that they haven't gotten involved for one reason or another that I think maybe we'll look to see them do in the future.
And Ty Washington, another one of those guys where we're thinking, maybe him and Varkey's are going to be more run blocking. And then when you get into those goal line situations, maybe they sneak out on some of those RPOs from down in the end zone. But we really haven't seen that. And I think it also comes to Arkansas's inability, I should say, against A&M to sustain long drives. It's something that they talked about after the game where they wanted to get the ball moving and stuff, and a lot of it was just punts and trying to play the field position game, which against this Tennessee team, it's not going to be good enough. And we've talked a lot about offense. Let's talk a little bit about defense right now. I'm curious, who's the player that you're most interested in this Tennessee game? You know about Nico I, but really it's their running game of Tennessee that really poses that real sustainable threat.
Right. I mean, Dylan Sampson is now the SEC's leading rusher. After Jaquindon Jackson kind of got bottled up a little bit against Texas A&M, that average drops a little bit, and Tennessee's on a bye week. So Dylan Sampson now the leading rusher. And then they have another guy, I think it's Deshaun Bishop. He's also, I think, number 7 in the SEC in rushing. And so they have 2 of the top 10 running backs in the SEC. That's a lot to ask this Arkansas defense to contain when you have both of those, plus Nico, plus the passing game, all of that. There's going to be a lot happening for them, and they have to find a way.
And what is that way going to be? Is it going to be loading the box, do you think? Is it going to be trying to play a little bit more coverage, maybe keeping a spy on Nico? Where do you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to load the box a little bit just with both of those, the potential for both of those guys. They can throw either one at you, and it doesn't really matter. But at the same time, I mean, Nico will beat you with his arm. So it's one of those really interesting schematic spots for this defense, for Travis Williams. And I think I expect to see them try to stop the run more, would be my guess.
And again, you see that a little bit with Tennessee. You got to stop the run, and you're okay giving up some of those big plays, but that's been the issue with Arkansas, right? Is these drives that you've seen against Texas A&M when they scored back, you had them on kind of third and short, third and medium, and the next thing you know, they're scoring a 73-yard touchdown and tying the game. Is that something you'd like to see? Maybe if Jalen Braxton or Hudson Clark comes back, getting a little more reinforcements in the secondary, or is it just having the young guys step up that they were against Auburn? But again, now you face some of the better passing offenses in the SEC and guys not like Hank Brown and Peyton Thorne who are going to throw 4 or 5 interceptions.
Right, and I mean, NC State, which is having a rough year, they got 2 picks on Nico. So I think if you can force Tennessee into some mistakes, they are capable of making them. He hasn't made many, but if Arkansas can do, he's not Peyton Thorne, he's not Hank Brown, like you said. But if Arkansas can do some of the things that it did in terms of forcing them into errors, then I think, I don't think you're going to see 6 picks or whatever, but I think you could see them make some mistakes, and then it will be on the offense to capitalize on that. That's the other thing I'm watching majorly is when they do get opportunity, what do they do with it? Because we've seen them get opportunity and then squander it. And they can't keep doing that if they're going to keep doing this. Especially, we talk a lot about the close game issue, how they keep not being able to close out close games. That's how you do it. You have to find a way to capitalize on that, and the offense just has to find a way to do that if it's able to get some of those opportunities against Tennessee.
And Tennessee, again, they're a team that they're as good as they are. They haven't played the competition that maybe you thought Oklahoma offensive problems that they had. Same thing kind of NC State, like you just touched on, where they were a top 25 team. Everyone thought that game was going to be close, and Tennessee blew them out of the water. NC State now is kind of throwing away their season a little bit. But before we go and talk a little bit about basketball, curious what your overall take is this weekend. If Arkansas is to win this game, blank has to happen.
Oh, man. The offense has to be a lot better. Taylor Green has to be on it. The offensive line has to be on it. They have to show some of those differences. I really think this comes down to what Arkansas's offense is able to do. And Tennessee's defense is great. This will be statistically the best offense that they've faced so far. I still think that Tennessee's defense will be elite even when we see them play some of these better offenses, but Arkansas has to play up to this defense.
And being at home, do you think that's going to help at all? And then we'll talk some basketball really quickly.
It definitely doesn't hurt. It should certainly help. And I think, they've been gone for so long. I do expect a really good crowd. I think even when, they're coming off a disappointing game and there's kind of some anxiety among the fans, I do think people are going to show up really well because they're finally here and they're finally have this great night game. So I expect a good crowd.
And it's going to be a stripe out, which is really exciting to see. My first stripe out that I've ever seen at Razorback Stadium. So interested to see how that goes. Do we get a quick prediction from you?
I think Tennessee's going to win.
Yeah,
I don't have a score. I don't have a
Uh-huh.
score in my mind, but I do have Tennessee. Yeah. I just think it's just too much going on, and too many of Tennessee's strengths are mismatches for Arkansas's weaknesses that I think Tennessee pulls it out.
All right, let's talk quickly basketball. That's it for our football discussion. Really quick basketball before we have to wrap up. Coach Cal had his press conference earlier this week. What stood out to you from Cal speaking to the media to kind of prepare as we're about 3.5 weeks or so from opening day?
Yeah, it's been so interesting to adjust to covering. Anytime you're covering a new coach, it's kind of getting the vibe of how they do with media, what their press conferences are like. And he's a guy that you just get him on a topic and he'll just take it wherever it's going to go. You don't know where he's going to end up. But no, I think what a lot of this press conference was about was kind of setting the table for what they're going to do this preseason. So a lot of that is, taking the show on the road, going to Hot Springs, Pine Bluff, things like that. So I think he seems to be really invested in trying to get this state bought into this team. And I think that's really important for a guy that's new, for a guy that's so associated with a different program in the SEC, for him to kind of be buying into this state and this brand a little bit more. I think we'll see a little bit later on, it felt like he didn't talk as much, basketball stuff the other day. It was a lot of kind of table setting, brand building kind of things. But so I'll be interested as they go through practices what we start to learn about this actual team on the court.
And it's something that you see from that must kind of started a couple of years ago where it's bringing the basketball team around, getting the people to really from around the state to support. Again, we talk about Arkansas. It's the only major brand when it comes to pro or college sports in the entire state. So it's the ability to have to connect with all these people and him going down to Hot Springs in some of these areas that those people might not get up, and it's building that culture, and you do that through that way. So I'll be curious to see. I agree with you on that. But before we go really quickly, what's one thing that you're most interested in as basketball season is right around the corner?
I'm really interested in Jonas Idu, just like what they do with him. I remember, I don't cover all of our basketball games for us, but I go to a lot of them, and I remember going to Rick Barnes' press conference after that, and just talking to him about, Jonas had such a good game against Arkansas, and just talking to him about him and about the kind of player he was, how he had grown. I'll be interested to see how they use him with all these other big pieces. I think there's been a lot of talk about some of the Kentucky transfers, that this other guy, I think I'll be curious where he kind of slots in. I think he's being a little bit slept on.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be fun to see him and Trevin Brazil. You get him back in Fayetteville for another year. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage that 4-5 rotation spot. And can't forget Big Z, too, when he gets healthy. He was just in a boot, but Coach Cal said that is all good. Well, Christina, thank you so much for coming on this week's PTN Extra. That's going to do it for our show. Be sure to tune in to Arkansas taking on Tennessee, I should say, this Saturday on ABC, 6:30 p.m. kick, and we'll see what happens with basketball season. Christina, thank you again. That's going to do it for PTN Extra this week. We'll see you all right back here next Wednesday on PTN Extra.